guys, it's time for another episode of Hammer and Spanner. In this episode I thought I should show you the fuel system of the CLK. We will also look into our cooling setup. That is, it's a bit special, so I will try to walk through all of that parts. And then we will end off by showing you the dry sump system. So let's get right to it and begin. We should start with the fuel system. In this car we're running E85, so all of the products you're about to see are E85 approved. The hoses, the pumps, the filters and everything like that. So that's important, because if you don't have a E85 approved product, it might leave some residue in the system, which in that case could clog your injectors and maybe melt the piston or something like that. So make sure you have approved stuff. To start off, we have a fuel cell. This is a 12-gallon fuel cell from ATL. It's 12 gallon is equivalent to 45 liters in the metric system. And inside of that we have this unit. This is called a CFC unit, called competition fuel cell unit. And this is one product that we helped develop together with Nuke Performance. And this unit fits all the standard 24-volt pattern fuel cells, as long as it's deep enough, but you have all the measurements and stuff like that at the Nuke Performance website, so just check that out if you're interested. The whole idea behind this system is that usually you're running a external surge tank to make sure you don't get any air pumped forward to the engine, which in that case would you make fuel starvation. So that means that you have to have a pump that pumps from the fuel cell up to that surge tank and back, and then you have to have an external pump. You have to have lines going forward and back and everything like that. Almost every time gets more expensive than this unit. So the whole idea is that you get everything combined inside the fuel cell instead of having external stuff and lines going everywhere. So to start off, the CFC unit, I will show a small video and photo here to get an understanding of how it looks. Inside this lid, you can see under here, this connectors goes to a feeder pump that feeds the internal surge tank. Inside here we have a Dutchwerks DV300 feeder pump. This makes sure that the surge tank that's underneath here is always filled up, so it's continually overflowing this to make sure that the two main pumps that are in the bottom of that surge tank never gets the possibility of getting air into the system. So the two fuel pumps we're running for the engine is DV400, so they're extremely high flow and also E85 compatible as the other pump. And these are connected through a small connection here that makes it easy to get one single line out instead of having two split up and then going into one like most systems do afterwards. So that's kind of how that surge tank works. After that we get the big line out here, this dash 10, and that feeds forward to this filter. But that's not the only filter that we're running. All the pumps inside the fuel cell are running a small pre-filter. I'm going to show you that here. So this is a Dutchwerks DV400. These filters are connected on the bottom like this. Oops. You can do it like that if you want to. It's connected like that, and these are the scavenge filter for the fuel cell. So if you have any debris or small stuff, it gets stuck in this. But the really fine stuff is not completely stopped by this, but they stop almost everything, so they're really good. This is the same for the feeder pump. So But to make sure you don't get any debris in the fuel system that goes forward to the injectors, it's important to have a finer filter, and that's where this comes in. This is the Nuke 200mm filter, and it takes out all the small pieces of maybe rubber or anything that you might get into the fuel cell during a race weekend. So it's really important to have a pre-filter in the fuel cell and then a main filter that goes forward. We've been running this since we started racing, and that kind of two-step filtration has worked out really good for us. We have never had a faulty injector or anything like that. So I think you should take that in consideration, because filters are cheap, a blown engine is not. So well, let's go forward and check out the next part of the fuel system. So now we're in the front. To explain that, we have the dash 10, as I told you, in the back that feeds fuel in the front to the engine. That's the line that comes up here behind the engine. The reason we're pushing it from the behind to forward is just the space that we had. This works better for us, but usually you feed in here and take the return line here, but now we're using this way. It's the same function anyway. So here we have the dash 10 coming in through our new performance fuel rail, and then we have the return line going here. The return line goes through an E85 sensor that picks up fuel temperature and also the E85 ratio. So if you get bad fuel, you get a warning, you might need to stop. The return line then is routed up here to the new performance fuel pressure regulator. So this is how you control the fuel pressure for the car. This is controlled by vacuum or boost. So you have set a like baseline pressure, and then it adds depending on how much boost it gets into the manifold. As you can see, we're running a regular manual gauge, but we also have this. If you check in here, you can see it. It's a fuel pressure sensor for the ECU, so we can also log that value inside the ECU. It's a really good feature. So yeah, underneath the fuel rail, we're running a Bosch Motorsports 2200 cc injector from BEP Race. We've been running these for the 2 last season, and they've been really good. It's easy to tune for the tuner, and we get good idle, and so far we haven't clogged up a single injector. So one thing to remember about injectors is to try to do a maintenance once a year. We actually remove this out of the engine after the season ends, sends them up to BGP Race, where they clean them, change filters, and flow test them to make sure they're equal flow and good to go for next year. And then you get them back in zip bags, and you don't take them out of it until it's time to race. And that's a good way of knowing that they haven't gone bad, because sitting in E85 or during a whole winter might destroy O-rings and clog them up. So that's also a tip to think about. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the fuel system. Let's head back and start with the dry sump system. I don't know if many of you know how a dry sump system works. I think that a lot of people know of the word, but they don't understand how it works completely. So to start off, instead of having an oil pan that regular cars have, and you have a oil pump in the bottom that kind of holds the oil like this, and depending on how you turn, the oil is moving around. This is kind of a crucial part for the engine, of course, because this produces oil pressure. The thing that can happen with a regular wet sump is that if the oil is moving around too much or not getting down from the cylinder head quickly enough and the level is going low, is that in some cases when the oil is going around, the pump might suck air instead of oil. This makes the pressure drop and might lead to a faulty engine. The dry sump system, in the other hand, it has no internal pump. Usually there are some brands that has that as well, but in this case we have an external pump on the side of the engine. I will show you more when we get forward. The whole idea about this system is kind of the same as the surge system. We use this instead of a wet sump or the oil pan. So inside of here we fill up our oil here, and we have a certain level inside of here with engine oil. So there's no oil filling in the front, we use it all in the back. You can see it's kind of long and narrow. That means that this is the same principle as the surge tank, that we take out the oil in the bottom. So no matter how much you would shake this bottle, you always have the oil in the bottom. You can never suck air front to the engine, and that helps you maintain the oil pressure in a better way. So to ventilate this, we also have this. If you check out here, we have a small ventilation tank, catch tank from Nuke Performance. This is a 3 liter. Hopefully it hits the markets pretty soon. We've been trying it out and it's been working good for us. So the pump in the front sucks out all the oil and all the air from the engine when you're running, and this comes back in the mix of oil and air, and this is of course pressurized, and this has to be ventilated somehow. So the idea of a dry sump tank is that you get the oil and air coming in here in the top of the cylinder, and then it's supposed to go spinning around on the edges of the tank, and this way helps it separate the air from the oil, because you don't want the foamy oil going forward to the engine. So that's kind of the whole reason, or the function behind the dry sump tank, is to separate oil and air, so that you don't get the foamy stuff going forward to the pump. So that's kind of for the trunk. Short note is that we have one -16 line going forward to the engine. This is a PDFE. It's a hard hose to make sure that we don't get the hose to collapse when you're sucking so much oil from the tank. And then you have a -16 going backwards to the tank with oil and air, of course, so it's kind of pulsating a bit. So let's move forward and check out the dry sump pump. I'm just going to remove this so we can see a bit better. So as you can see here, this is the dry sump pump. This is Auto Verdi. I think it's a 5-stage scavenge pump and a 1-stage pressure. So you see this little tube coming out here. This is the feeder line from the tank I showed you in the rear. So this is kind of a self-rinning flow of oil here, but thanks to the pump it's sucking out oil and creating pressure. So if you see here, this is the pressure hose going out of the pump through this small cooler. You can see it's on top of the intercooler, so it's a kind of a small, compact, and it's good because it's out of reach for the most crashes, because we have a bash bar in front. Then the pressure goes from here to this Canton Motorsports oil filter house. So this is an insert filter, and then we have an oil pressure sensor from BAP Race as well. And then you have the oil pressure hose going out into the engine and pressurizing the system. So to make the engine system work, we have plugged the hole underneath that the original pump pumped through, so it's fed backwards down to feed the chain tensioner and also to lubricate the engine. And we also have a small line from after the filter going to the turbo. So this is the lubrication for the turbo, and down here we have the return line going into a small box. And this box is also ventilated here to make sure that we don't create a suction pressure underneath the bearing of the EFR turbo. So because the bearings doesn't like a low pressure there. So so as I told you, the pump has 5 scavenge steps. That means that it has 5 different lines going out to scavenge oil from the engine and sending it back from this to this line back to the tank. So one is going to the turbo, all the oil going through the turbo gets sucked out there, going back. And then we have the dry sump oil pan. I will show you a little bit of a video when we made the hoses here. This is kind of a special hose because it has to be able to withstand vacuum. So when it's sucking all the air and oil out, it can't collapse. So we made these hoses from BGP Race. Huge thanks for making this because it was a really tight fit, and he made it possible in a very short time period before this season. So and also the oil pan is from Nuke Performance. It's available in their web shop, and I think it's the only oil pan available for M104. And I also think it fits most of the OM 606 and 603 engines. But DM me and I will try to figure it out if it fits your engine, if you have any questions. So yeah, you can also see here, as I forgot to tell you, this pump is driven by a belt instead of the internal chain. So we have done a small adapter here to get a pulley on the crank, and then you can change this pulley to gain different pressures and different speed of the pump. So this is of course a little bit of a downside, because if you were to hit anything or get a stone in here, this belt might go off. But so far so good. We have had one stone going in, but the belt made it through that time. So that's one of the downsides of the pump. Inside the pump we also have a pressure regulator, so you could bypass oil if you want a lower pressure. So that's about it. Now I think we should head over and check out the cooling setup, because that's a custom thing as well. So let's go back again. So start off, all the original water pump and stuff like that has been plugged off, so we're not using any of the original outputs and inputs for the water, only the one that pushes in water behind the pump into the cylinder block. So instead of using the original pump, we're using this. This is a Davis Craig 150 EVP pump. So you're able to control it by speed, but right now we have changed over to running it at full speed all the time. Then we have a cooler here, and a radiator, so this is actually from a NASCAR right now, and it's actually a little bit of a problem because it's so thick. It's made to sit in the front of a NASCAR and maybe doing 300 kilometers an hour. And now it's sitting in the trunk of a drift car. So the only thing pulling air through it is this radiator fan, and it's a Volvo 850. I think it produces around 3,600 CFM. I was told that by a friend of mine. And connected to this is also this expansion tank. So when the water is pressurized and it gets hot, it expands a bit, and this is to be able to take that expansion and not overflow every time. And you see this small line here, that's the highest point of the engine to make the system bleed easier. And for those who want to know what kind of lid we're using, this is a Volvo lid. It's easy to find here in Sweden, and it's been working good for us, so that's why we're using it. Another side note about the radiator system is that we have actually a dual pass setup. So right now the water is coming back here in the top half of the radiator. It has to pass through the radiator that way, and then down, and then back, and then getting sucked out and pushed forward to the engine. This makes the radiator become a little bit more efficient, because it has to, all the water has to pass 2 times through the radiator. And as you can see here, all of the fittings on the car are dash 20, going front and back from the engine, and we got the help from LMR to supply those. So thankful for that help. So let's go forward and check out the cooling on the engine. So as I told you, we don't use the original water pump anymore. To take a little bit of a sidestep, the original place that we have the water pump, we have now put a power steering pump. This is actually from an SR20 from the S14. So we have made a custom pulley and everything like that, so this sits completely over that spot that the original one would make. So that's why we can't have the original pump. The dry sump pump moves it up, and therefore we have a little bit of a space issue. Good English there. So to explain a little bit of how it works, we can move over here first. You can see here, these are the water lines. So the top one here, it's the water coming into the engine. It goes around, goes underneath the intake manifold and into the block. And this one is the return line, so it comes out of here. So to explain the flow, we go to the engine that we're going to have as a dummy. So here you can see we use 3 inputs for the water. It's the stock one for the water pump, and this frost plug is removed and replaced with a connector, and also that one. So we fill up the engine by pushing water here, going up through the block, and then filling up the cylinder head, and then we take it out between each cylinder here. So this is the outflow on the exhaust port. So between each cylinder we have an exit for water, and to collect all of this water we have this pipe. This is made by copper, and I want to dedicate this video to Johan Skogsby because he loves that copper shit. Still working, bro, still working. So the idea behind this, we got it from Rallycross because we've seen a lot of different teams using this version. So instead of getting the stock flow, which is that you get water in here, it goes back and gets hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter and goes out the radiator. Now you get the flow coming in from the block, filling it up, coming to the heat side, that's the half side of the engine where the exhaust coming out, gets hot and directly gets sent back to the radiator. This way the water flows a very short period of time through the hot part, and you get a very even flow of cooling because you take it out in 5 different ports. So it keeps the cylinder head more evenly hot, and it's been working great even though we have a little bit of a too thick radiator in the back. So we still have some small things that we want to change about some connections and stuff, but it's been working pretty good, and we'll try to develop it a little bit more in the future. But so yeah, I kind of think that's it for the fuel system, the dry sump system and the water system. So I hope you enjoyed it. This was episode 4 of Hammer and Spanner. Make sure you subscribe and share with your friends, and let us know if you missed out on something, and we will try to answer it in the comments below. So talk to you soon.